This is our week 16. So basically, we need to actually still talk about what we have to do for the last few weeks. So next week, supposedly, is our Dragon Ball Festival holiday. But I think you also received the notification that we are going to have the, still have the third level alert. So we will still stay home mostly, work from home, distance learning until almost the end of June. So that will be 28th. But no matter what, everything that in this semester, supposedly we will finish. So don't worry, we will have enough time actually stay home and thinking about research. And I don't know what's the situation in Germany right now, Lucas. Lucas, do you have no more
Yes.
life back after the vaccination? How's the life in your country right now?
My second vaccination is actually next weekend, and then I still got 2 weeks until it actually works. It's activated,
Uh,
how to say. So, but there's no lockdown. Like,
okay.
still restrictions, but not that intense anymore.
All right, all right. We don't really have a lockdown, but we are sort of the first time to be encouraged to stay home. And for the so-called Dragon Ball Festival, is one of the three most important family union day, I think, in the whole year. So it's a bit pity, but we see lots of like I would say Facebook posts or some of the memes, all the sort of people keep reminding each other we don't go home because it will be a best way to stay put and keep our family from danger, the risk of the COVID-19 infection. So okay, so next week still because supposedly it's a public holiday, so we won't have the class. But you still can make appointment with me if you want to do further discussions before the last week, which will be the 21st. You have the final presentation. So here has the percentage. You will have the final paper total 25% marks. As usual, the oral presentation will be 5% and your written paper will be 30%. So that's quite a lot. So through the whole semester, mostly we have the PowerPoint presentation. And some of you, for the proposal, you actually send me some write-ups. But no matter what, the final paper will be, I would say reflecting what you changes and then also your holistic thinking of the whole research, including your data analysis and so on and so forth. Okay. Oh, I got to actually move my line, otherwise it will keep popping out to, sorry. Or I just do it later. But okay. So final paper, you will have to finish, here's is some of the things actually stated in the syllabus. So the length of the written paper will be less than 5,000 words. But I'm not very strict about how many words and all the some of the requirements. If you want to write longer, that's fine. And this semester you have one man group or two-person group. So, but it won't affect how I evaluate you because I do encourage you. I will give a little bit thoughts into it, but not majorly influencing about the marks. Still will be depending on the quality of your paper. All right, if you have any question, you can ask me. Maybe you will ask some question about the discussion. We will actually have, I think, for our proposal, actually we have the rotation, right? The first group presentation will be the discussion for the next second group. We will still follow the rule. And it's a good practice, actually will help you to get familiar or get some practices for the international conferences. Usually they will have the discussion role, but mostly the role will be played by senior professors because they are more likely to give you some good feedback. I mean, opinions, how to improve. your research papers and so on and so forth. So the final thing actually will be all ended unless you have different thoughts. Yeah, so the deadline will be 21st June. Will you have any problems to finish everything then? If you have no objection, then we will fix to the deadline. So basically, you will have the presentation and also the final paper turn in, meaning you have to upload into the e-Moodle. Will it be all right? If
Okay.
it's okay, you can. Okay, thank you, Mimi, for your response. Okay, Ari, you are here, just in
Yeah, sorry
time.
for being late. Why can't I
Okay, we just talked about the final paper. So you will get the notes actually from the PPT later on. But do you want to start your presentation first? I
Yeah,
think you are still have one, yeah, remaining. So Andrew, please help keeping the time. So how much time that you have? 10 minutes, right?
yeah.
Okay. So if you are ready, I can give up my screen control and give to you.
Okay, it's here.
So Andrew, please, keep track of the time. So basically that will be like this. At the 9 minutes, then Andrew will open the mic and you will hear the alarm. So basically, when you hear the ring or whatever, is the reminder for you to only have 1 more minute to wrap up. Okay? So that's
Okay,
how we
is it
will do
working?
it. Yes, we see your screen right now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, if you are ready, we can start.
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I'll be covering podcasting as a determining agent of cognitive processing. So this is the outline that I hope to use: the introduction, the research aim, related studies, research gap, research theories, research framework, and methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are podcasts? So, Meng 2005 defines podcasting as wait, is this full screen? Sorry, how do I? Okay, better. Yeah, defines podcasting as a process of capturing an audio event, song, speech, or a mix of songs, and then posting that digital sound object to a website or blog in a data structure called the RSS 2.0 envelope or feed. So podcasts were basically just online radio shows, but they developed and they evolved since then, and now they're being streamed. There are live events, there are physical events, there are podcasting shows where people go pay entry to go to these venues and see the podcast happening in real time. So they were popularized by MTV personality Adam Curry, known as a Podfather, through his daily show, Daily Source Code. iTunes began carrying podcasts in 2005, and the rest is history. So it's currently dubbed the radio for the people and became popular in 2014, although it was established in 2004. There are almost 1 million podcasts today, and that's still growing. Okay, so the research questions I hope to apply is have podcasts become the medium in which the current generation is being socialized, and to what extent does podcast affect the cognitive processing of people between the ages of 18 and 45? So these are just some related studies that I came across and some indirect related studies that cover the general spectrum, but not the exact topic of which I'm focusing right now. So a few of them are: what is the potential when used together, podcast cognitive theory, what is a social learning, and a social cognitive approach to traditional media content and social use. And of course, I have to look into the impact of radio, since there aren't much cognitive podcast studies in terms of cognitive processing, but there are in terms of education. So they would have already had radio studies. So I picked one with focus on advertising, which consumer behavior always focuses on some point on the cognitive processing. So the research gap I just mentioned, they're limited to the educational system. The recent popularity of podcasts coupled with the pandemic hasn't allowed for detailed research to be carried out, and the use of RSS could impact the effectiveness of podcast MLOs, and this has yet to be studied. So I'm going to use these two theories, social learning theories. The social learning theory may lead to the changes in social networks and wider societal and institutional structures. In this context, conceptualize social learning as a process where different actors can deliberate and negotiate rules, norms, and power relations, which they facilitate through workshops with natural resource users. And the social cognitive theory, which is used in psychology, education, and communication, holds that portions of an individual's knowledge acquisition can be directly related to observing others within the context of social interactions, experiences, and outside media influences. So the methodology, I applied sampling purposes sampling. I interviewed 12 Caribbean American and Taiwanese podcast consumers and non-podcast consumers, 3 from each region. The age range was 18 to 45. The weekly consumers of the Joe Budden podcast or network. So the Joe Budden network consists of 3 different podcast shows, with their lead podcast show being the Joe Budden podcast. Data collection, I did in-depth interview with semi-structured questions, and data analysis, I use a thematic analysis method. So these are the questions that I used. I used from 1 to 5 would be the general questions, just to get the interviewee comfortable with answering the questions, and then I went on to more detailed questions that I don't think I need to read right now. So I'll go into what I've discovered so far. So I found that out of my interviewee batch, I found 8 people that are avid podcast viewers and 4 people that are not. So I separated these two. So the ages of the 8 people are between 25 to 32. The mean age is 30. They view podcasts from twice per week to every day in that week. These interviewees usually consume the Joe Budden podcast for pop and hip hop culture news and debates. The non-viewers, ages 20 to 25 and a mean age of 22, they reported that they don't view the podcast, but if they do, they happen to come across it at least twice a week, meaning they would hear it, but they won't listen to it. 2 of these interviewees never saw the Joe Budden podcast, but have seen clips on social media. The other 2 have seen it because of their partners, their relationship partners, or their friends, and they have no vested interest in it. I identified certain recurring themes: habit consistency, 90%, podcast as a new media, 90% also, social learning, 80%, and social cognitive, 90%. So to explain, based on my analysis of data, 90% of interviewees reported consistency in watching the Joe Budden podcast. Interviewees reported mostly consuming the podcast before work or school and during breaks at work or school as part of their daily routine. 10% reported overhearing the podcast from their partners, but not actively listening to it, only twice per week. And 10% of the batch were not consumers. So, based on my analysis, most interviewees considered podcasting as a form of new media, replacing or sharing consumption with their radio programs. Meaning that although they look at podcasts, they would also continue looking at their radio shows. So 90% consume for news, 60% consume for lifestyle tips, and 80% consume for entertainment. As it relates to social learning, based on my findings, 90% reacted to the social learning theory-based questions. 50% felt prompted to purchase merchandise seen on the podcast. 80% found that their day-to-day activities were influenced in the form of decision-making after Joe Budden and co-hosts mentioned hobbies and habits. 70% admit to watching the podcast before forming a firm opinion on a topic. And in terms of social cognitive, based on my findings, 90% of interviewees admitted to forming an opinion on the recent development in the podcast after viewing other podcasts and also the Joe Budden podcast. In relation to Joe Budden's public disagreement with co-host, person formed an opinion after Joe Budden himself discussed it on his platform. In relation to the accusations made against him, opinions were formed after Joe's apology and also viewing the podcast episode in which the incident occurred. So what had happened while I was conducting studies, there was a development on the podcast where Joe Budden and his two co-hosts had a very public disagreement on their podcast. They posted the episode and it ended in him firing two of them on air. While this is happening, another podcast on the Joe Budden network, he went as a guest and he made some sexual inappropriate comments towards his co-host. So I included that in my questions.
Okay, quickly conclude.
In conclusion, interviewees displayed being heavily influenced by the podcast as it relates to cognitive processing. Most interviewees reported, whether conclusively or unconclusively, have made the podcast consumption a part of their daily routine. Most interviewees reported to not form an opinion until it's discussed on the podcast or another. I believe this brief study has proven research question 1 and 2 answers to be a resounding yes without a doubt. So that's what I have so far. Thank you, and let me know if there are any questions.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. Okay, I'm going to actually discuss because I have the screenshot. Last time I also did all the screenshots behind your presentation for each group, so I can remember the details. So I'm going to control the screen. Oh, just
Okay.
wait. Okay.
I'll take it off. How do I do that?
It's okay. Don't worry. I'll do it.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay, so Ari, because this time we are mostly focusing on your sort of data collection and RQ. So the first reminder is that because last time we discussed, you were focusing on one specific kind of the podcasting, right? And then so you used Joe Golden. I'm not familiar with him, to be honest. But I did do some like a quick check while you present. So obviously he's a famous guy, and then it's also related to why you recruited the nationalities people, right? Because there's cultural or educational, I don't know, how you're going to frame it, but you have to explain why you interview these people and relate it to Joe Biden's podcast and any kind of specific genre of that podcast, because they are totally linking to together. You cannot claim everything in the podcast actually will be related to your results, because you are only focusing on a smaller group and a specific show, right? So narrow down your topic first, and give an explanation or justification why you're focusing on this and what you want to find out. So you will definitely to introduce the this specific show and the genre, and then link to your research recruitments of the participants and your RQ. I think that's very important. Otherwise, you cannot say you answer the question, because you only ask very targeted people. So the RQs that you propose here, you will need to actually make sort of adjustments, right? Because you ask social learning theory, but you're also talking about social cognitive theories. So theory here usually won't be included in the RQs. So what actually is the main things that you want to find out, main insights you will need to think about. If you are talking about learning, what kind of things they learn? If you are talking about cognitive inferences and what kind of cognitive inferences, we tend to actually focusing a lot on the theory itself, but theories need to actually be reflecting in your research questions. Behind your research question, actually it should be reflecting from your interview questions. So if you totally talking about social cognitive theories model, then they will reflecting the key things that you need to find out. Maybe it's about knowledge, maybe it's about self-efficacy. So you need to check what are the key concepts related to the essence of this theory and the model. Just looking back to the previous week's presentation that Esther and Rona, they did have lots of concepts, and then it's from some of the theories. And so that is a good demonstration. You need to think about that. And if you are talking about learning, so what kind of things need to be included? There should be attention, motivation. At least you need to check, not just using the term and not reflecting them or putting it in your research, I would say the interview questions. Because I look at what you actually listed your research questions like here. So all the things like the previous one are the more like demographics, it's background. You can only mention them in a descriptive way, that one sentence to describe your participants. And then the usage, how they use, that is the behavior. And after that, in fact, it will be the most important part of your studies. Then you only have 5 or less questions. And if you talking about social cognitive and learning, then you only use each one questions and ask them yes or no. But how can you actually get the answer out? I would suggest you, in fact, to go back and then check with your, at least I double check follow-up questions with the A active person, and to make up some of the questions about your social cognitive or social learning perspectives. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Actually, your analysis can be supported. Your conclusion will be a bit like lack of evidence from your data. Okay. And then here you say it's a purposive sampling is good, and you have 3 different kinds of people. But I think it's more meaningful to have people actually listen to the show, and this is specific show, and what did they learn, and what actually they have the knowledge, and what they have the influences. Okay. And then since you are having younger people in your data set, you don't need to still keep the original like age until 25, because obviously you only have 30 something, like 25 to 32.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a lot of things you need to sort of make the whole paper in a coherent way and think through. Instead of, you are talking about different kinds of aspects or stories, you have different directions in each segment. Yeah, just put them together.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think these are the key points that I would like to mention. And one last point is that you ask them whether they consider podcast as the new media. Yeah, I think most people will agree with that. But what actually is beyond the question? Because you want to know this is a new media and what specific things or what kind of maybe affordances, like last groups looking at the clubhouse, they have the audio parts or feeling of, social presence or different kind of things, interaction. So what kind of podcast? Podcast is that live or podcast is recorded? When it's recorded, how actually influence people and how can you know the impact? Would it be different from the traditional radio show or online radio stations? I think these are interesting questions to actually tease out how this so-called new type of new media influencing the audiences, at least their active listeners,
Okay.
right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think you still have a couple of weeks to actually, improve the content. So, okay. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
We can discuss next week. As I mentioned earlier, next week is the Dragon Ball Festival. However, if you want to discuss, you can make appointment with me next week. Okay. So today, what's the topic we're going to cover? I think I'm going to use the very precious last week and to talk about one of my important line of research. It's about mobile impact. And if I have time, I will talk about the more positive, the rosy part, how mobile phone influencing the family relations, influencing the romantic dating, or different kinds of, relations or working, maybe working outcomes, or so on and so forth. However, today we are more looking at the dark side. So the topic will be the other side of the smartphone. Studies I'm going to cover is about mobile dependency. Okay, so I want to use this topic that also this topic has been presented in Manila's international conferences that I was the keynote speakers invited by Professor Paragus in 2019 October. I think that was the last time I ever traveling overseas. So yeah, okay. So let's just looking at what actually we talk about the multi-screen, right? And then the multi-screen studies Google has done in 2013. It specifies smartphones play a crucial role because it's the backbone to link all the daily short interactions together. So it's the smartphone become all-in-one device. We can use shopping, learning, communication, working, and even dating or anything. That gaming, okay? So different aspects of our life actually can be actually reflected here. So usually I would say the first things I touch will be the smartphone because it's set alarm in the very morning. And then when I sleep, I still will touch it and then set the alarm. Or, I may listening to some of the audio shows and so on and so forth. So it's a very intimate device that everyone has. So that's why people would like to use that to connect to you. But today we want to talking about because the smartphone is very important and we are very attached to it. So definitely we will have the dependency on that device. And in the past studies, they talk about the adoptions and effects. And usually they started to looking at the young people because they tend to think young people are the more active users, innovators. And because they are young, they are prone to be affected by the not so desirable effects. So they're talking about perpetual contact, which means constantly we will stay on the mobile activities. And that's lots of social media components or social connectivities over there. So young people, they tend to care more about friends or peers. So usually any kinds of new device, they become prevalently used. Um, the I would say the researchers tend to looking at the young people. And I think other reasons could be young people, university students, or students are easy, convenient samples for people to, researchers to observe or interview or doing the survey. So no matter what, the justifications can starting from Rogers' innovation adoption theories, young people tend to be the early adopter. So here has some of the past studies. And so based on the usage and the patterns, they found how much that young people or other social groups or age groups get more, spend more time and cannot get their hands or eyes off their phones. Then people said, okay, so it's the symptoms of mobile phone adoption. It's the line of the studies actually following the internet addiction, internet addiction and mobile addiction. So what kind of things that mobile phone that we feel like more addicted to or spend more time? In the past studies, they worry about young people using the SMS, which is the short message. At the time, the voice call was very, very expensive. And when in the time of non-smartphone, SMS was a more convenient way to test each other. So that is one thing that lots of researchers have investigated. So here, talking about mobile addiction. So the definition here is about excessive use of the cell phone has achieved increasing attention from scholars and the media, that particularly focusing on the contributing factors and negative impact of the addictions on so-called teenagers and young adults. So basically, the definition reflects, okay, it's the so-called excessive use. So what is excessive use? Is that has a fixed number, may not be the same in each country or each social group, right? Okay, so but people are interested in examining what kind of factors and what kind of impact of such mobile addiction phenomenon or symptoms. Okay, so now I'm going to play a video. The video was actually made in 2013, long time ago. So the symptoms of the mobile additional dependency actually appeared quite long time ago. It's a short video. Until now, it still have more than 5 million people watch it, accumulated number. Okay, so this is the first video I would like to share with you. So I would like to ask you, have you experienced any of these before? I mean, before the COVID-19, no matter it's stay home or lockdown. I mean, that's not too long time ago, right? So how was the situation that, if in Taiwan, that's the before, like almost 1 month ago, did you experience that? So Ming or anyone?
For me, not really, because I don't use like if I have lunch with friends, that's not what I'm going to do, and I don't like it either. And I think my friends are similar to me, so we don't do that on the table really, and neither does my family. So we're like not typical, but we
Okay,
don't really do that.
okay, so using phone while you have the social gathering is not a good manner. Yeah. Okay. So anyone else experienced this before? Or you have any words to say? Could I say you feel like it's an addiction, Rona?
Um, from my experience in my family, we don't use that, but with friends, I think it's pretty common. I mean, years ago, we think that using cell phone when having social gathering is weird or not respecting other people, but now we seem to normalize it among friends.
I
I
see.
feel like it's really weird that I no longer think it's not good. I used to feel like it's not good, but right now, honestly, I think it's like just another thing that we do, like talking or things like that. And we often share what's on the phone to each other or what we are doing as well. So we kind of incorporate this technology into the whole social gathering,
Okay, good.
but not with the older generation still.
Sure. So maybe that's actually who you are with actually may influencing the behaviors you have. Uh, some studies like Heyman's also argue that staying with the social circle, basically among young people, if they keep using the phone, is not considered as a addiction, just like what Rona said, because it's a way how the young people, live the life, maybe in most of the circles. And so here talk about mobile addiction is like a maladaptive pattern of the mobile devices resulting in the psychological impairments. But if we're looking at some groups of people may normalize it, like young people think that it's not an inappropriate things to do, but still have some other young people feel like that's a warning sign. It's not a good thing. So have you heard about the words called Phubbing? If not, actually it was the deriving from Australia. That's a Melbourne group of people. They start to coin these words. Let's look at. So okay, the first part is still the symptoms. Okay, so I think the last sentence actually is very alarming because everyone has to use the mobile phone every day. So no matter what, whether we think we are addicted or we are not yet addicted but just dependent on it, actually we cannot live without it, right? Okay, so different social group may have different patterns, but still they're talking about the behaviors actually is sort of appearing, and then people need to negotiate whether they will use to it, or they actually feel like it's not appropriate. But here I just want to explain why, because we're talking about addictions, also looking at addiction parts, how it actually being defined in the video. So addiction is, I think that they have very strict I would say some of the evaluation criteria and the definition and so on and so forth. But I personally feel like this kind of things like mobile dependency actually have the spectrum, which means we can be lightly dependent on technology, or we are heavily dependent on new technology. So everyone depend on different kinds of technology right now. Even during the COVID-19, we will have using the apps to detect the social distance, and we need to scan the QR codes using the phone to actually register ourselves to certain locations. So dependency on the new technologies sounds normal, but additions means abnormal, right? And it's sort of personal weakness. So only the heavy mobile dependency will turn into addiction. That's what I think. So basically, that's also have another difficulty to actually determine whether you are addict or not addict to the mobile phone, because different social group, like young people may use more. If we use the length of the usage or the frequency of the usage to actually define whether a certain degree as addiction, then they may not have a fixed or average hours, right? So these kind of things, if we want to say is addiction, I think it's overstated. And we do have the spectrum of the gray zones for people to have variations in the mobile or smartphone dependency. So that's why my line of research later on, I think next hour, I'm going to share with you. I did not use the mobile addiction as the phrase, but I used mobile dependency instead, because I think addiction is negative and not all my maybe survey participants can be considered as addiction, right? They are very subjective. And then it's across a different criteria, different evaluation assessment across the different countries and different age group. Okay, so I think we are going to have the break after 2 minutes. So I want you to think about, especially after watching 2 videos, you have the basic understandings and my opening slides to differentiate what is the mobile addictions and dependency. So I want you to think about your personal experiences or observations in your country or your social groups. Sort of assess your own of mobile dependency level. Do you think you just slightly depend on your smartphone, or you are heavily, or even you can consider yourself as addicted to your smartphones, and why? And if you are very attached to phones, what kind of activities that you are more like a stick to or glue yourself to the phones? And if you have the dependency, certainly you observe you have some symptoms or behavior patterns in what kind of behaviors that you have or your friends or your family have that you notice it's kind of a dependency. And we did mention about phubbing, because this is still a word that I would say the so-called phenomenon, the co-presence but not together, because you use the mobile phone, the phone to snub people, ignore them. Yeah, so the phenomenon or the has been defined and also investigated in different social situations, like family situations, friends, gatherings, and all different countries or contexts. Do you think phubbing is a backbone etiquette or just new norms? We briefly discussed about that earlier. So, okay. So this is our questions. These are the questions you can think of, and I will just ask you to share, in the first beginning of next class before I start to step into the more serious research based on, the overwhelmed or the prevalent patterns or the phenomena that we observe after using the mobile phone or smartphones. Okay, so now we don't have the bell ring, but my phone's actually and the computer shows is 2 o'clock. So let's have a 10 minutes break, and we can have sort of exchanging of the ideal opinions about the questions that I raised just now. So let's have a 10 minutes break, and then we can come back. Welcome back. Okay, so let's do this because I feel very alone. So now it's not about smartphone alone while we are together. It's even for the distant learning. When I couldn't see you, I feel very alone. So I think you also experience similar things when you present and then you become full screen and nobody seems like you are talking to yourself. Yeah, and there's no responses. So now we are going to discuss. So I would like you to open your mic and the camera if you can, and talk about any of the questions on the screen. Could you share your views with me? Yeah, or with your classmates. So I will ask her to talk first because Miming and Rona have shared something earlier.
Okay. I think I'll share about a little bit about the first video.
because I think I personally very related to the first video. Yeah, I think it is happening around my life before we stay at home. Because
Oh,
I think that the friends around me are always using phone like all the time. The video has just shown that what happened in my life. So when I was celebrating or watching a concert or doing something special, like they always like to use camera to capture the moments. So I think that the like dependent on the phone is because the function of the phone. Like because after mobile phone have came out that the function of camera and we can record. So like every moment in our life we have to have the action to capture it. So because it can stay in our phone, right? I remember that my parents, when they go to something somewhere special or they see a beautiful scenery, and their first action is to take out the phone and capture the scenery. So I think it's quite normal, but I don't think it is addiction because the mobile phone is too important to us. Like for myself, I think myself is a very heavy mobile phone user. I have to use my phone to maybe check on my agenda or take notes or use the camera function. But addiction for me is like maybe doing something that not so efficient or not productive on the phone like for a long time. Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, so that's my point of view.
Okay, so Esther talk about, no, I did not think of camera actually is one of the mobile activities that may, get us more addicted. So I did not really think about that before. So that's, but I do agree. Because if we cannot record, no matter it's a video, it's a photos, then we have nothing too much to share, right? So the capture after that, I think it's not just for memories. Oh, sometimes we want to share or even
Yeah.
show up, showing off at, some of our beautiful lives. Yeah, and then so you admitted that there are multiple activities that make you become very heavy users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
think that the phenomenon is more obvious after like Instagram have the stories function. Like
Why? Why? You
it
you
is
agree, all of you?
I don't know others, but for me when I was in my universities, I was very crazy about the IG stories. Like I have to film every moment.
Wow.
Whenever something is happening, maybe it's just very normal or maybe it's raining or the sun is very hot, and I would just film it and share it to my friends because I think the Instagram story has some limitation.
Yeah.
It's only 24 hours and you can share immediately. So that times I don't know what happened to me. I think that sharing is very important and I have to use it like every moment. So I was very crazy about the IG stories function.
Thank
Yeah.
you being so frank to share your experiences. So all of you nodding or you are sort of smiling. So you have similar experiences after the IG then the so-called instant stories. You change your behaviors of using phone or other things you would like to share. Yeah, anyone? Lucas?
Myself, I don't use it, but all my friends who use social media, they spam the stories, like they start to take pictures and film everything. Like I remember before the pandemic, I went to a large concert in Berlin
Uh-huh.
with I think 40,000 people,
Wow.
and like everyone was holding their phone for the full concert, and I'm like, I'm
Be
here to
there.
watch, to listen to the music, to enjoy the scenery. I
Uh-huh.
don't know the German band Rammstein, if you've ever heard of it. So they have
Mm,
a very beautiful show, and everyone was just taking pictures, and I couldn't even see sometimes the show because the people were holding their phone like this for the whole
yeah.
time. And this is one of the situations where I'm very annoyed and where I think, are you just addicted, or why do you film it? Because yeah,
I understand. So basically, people also before eating, they take pictures. Yeah, and the
yeah.
before enjoy anything like concerts or any beautiful activities than using phone to capture. So it seems like a mediator, but also block how we have the very pure experiences of our life or people around us. Yeah. So it seems like the co-presence are not very important, but people in the virtual communities, imaginary friends are more important to us somehow because of the phone and then the connected activities. So anything else you would like to share? I do think this kind of Phubbing phenomenon is considered as normal or not. And then Esther talked about productivity being influenced is actually part of the symptoms that she feel like she is too heavily, depending on the phones. So anything like bubbling or any symptoms you feel like could be actually diagnosis that yourself or your friends as heavy users or addicts. Rona, you want to share?
Okay. I think I'm a really heavy user of my mobile devices, but not limited to cell phone, sometimes iPad. And I think you have to think about the difference between addicted to social media and addicted to screen. I feel like I'm not addicted to social media, but I'm very addicted to screen because I now read books or watch videos, or even when I listen to uh, audios, I want to see something. I want to have a screen that displays some visual effects to me. So that's the reason why I'm addicted to these devices.
Okay. So Lucas, you want to respond? Screen addiction.
No, I just had some issue with my microphone.
I saw you switch on your mic. Okay, so screen addiction or screen so-called screen dependency will be the topic I also to share in the later part. So remember the Google multi-screen research, like almost like 8 years ago, they already found 90% of our activity on the screen. So just be careful, Rona, your eyes. Yeah, because all the streams have some damage to our eyes, and then we need to take a pose on the screen dependency. So Mimin and Ari want to have a quick sharing. Hi, Mimin.
Hi. Well, me personally, if 1 to 10, I think I'm like in the level of 5 on mobile dependency. But that's if I'm only counting in mobile phone. If I count in my notebook, then it will be 10. Like I almost never close my laptop, and uh, like Thorna said, I had a roommate, and I think it's a cool example to share that she would open 3 sources of media content at one time. Like one is her homework, and then one is a show, and then the other one is also a show, and then she can like have the 3 of them all together. But I don't know how she do it, but I think like multitasking is one of the reason why we get to be stick onto these things. I think that's like one major reason, because before, like the old cell phone or the old camera, you can only do one thing at an item, but now it's all combined. So we're like logically we will stick to one thing like our phone for a longer time because there's multiple functions. So like what Esther and Lorna said, I think it's important to slip to really figure out what are we doing on our mobile phone instead of just focusing on the time that we're spending on it. That's my
So
opinion.
I think you mentioned about multitasking, right? Multitasking becomes sort of our norm to live a life, even though we like it or not. And then the screens, they quickly can switch the activities. And personally, I also been used to multiple screens. And sometimes the boring stuff, you are even writing a paper, I admit it. I'll play the music all the time because I cannot bear, it's like a long time writing the academic paper is boring. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So listening some music can relieve the pain and keep me going. And sometimes, like a screen, there are lots of like a Black Mirror is the Netflix very classic show, and so I rewatch it, and then I think there's lots of things like also related to the screen and related to the technologies dependency and how influencing our life maybe in a bit scary way. So we need to sort of remind us, like Lucas said, enjoy the moment. We are human, not necessarily always have to be in front of the screen or mediated by any kind of screen, right? Okay. So thanks. I feel more like you are with me. Then I can continue to be on the full screen mode and to share my life of research with you. There are a couple, I would say more than a couple, a lot of studies I have done. Okay, thanks. I can, you can, if you like, you can stay on your camera, but if you would prefer to be not, then we can turn on the camera later on when we talk. So now the journey begins. So basically, I feel very interesting and to thinking about the mobile and smartphone dependency. At the time I started this line of study, I think majority of the scholars in Hong Kong, US, or different places, they stick to the term called mobile addiction. But I have told you why I didn't dislike that term, because I think that's not precise and not fair, and then not really reflecting the situation. And so I use the technological dependency theory and looking at the so-called smartphone or mobile phone as a dependency. So I start my journey from there. And so I need to, based on some of the past studies, I turn the addiction measurements into dependency measurements. Okay. So this is my first web survey. And it's starting from the college students, I admit it, because I have very small budget, and I can also justify the young people at more avid users of the mobile phone. They tend to have more dependency and likely to find out. We also concern the use of their smartphones, whether they will be influencing on their studies or different kind of specs and what kind of patterns they have. All right, so this is the first paper, and at that time, it's like the switching turning point that from the dumb phone, which means the feature phone, without the mobile internet and no touch screen, and then switch to smartphone. Mostly, I think the more attractive activity will come with the internet connections, like messengers, social media, and so on and so forth. So even it's university student samples, I did use the random stratified sampling. How could I do that? Because Nanyang Technological University, they have the full list of the registered students. So I did, I select different college and with the quota, percentage, and then I draw out students via the email address and then send out the invitation to them. So the data collections in 2012, and so they've been invited and give some incentive to them. And the final sample size, I sent out 2,000, but only get 529. Okay. Yet the gender is quite balanced, and also looking at Chinese populations, because in Singapore they have the multiracial groups. So it's 91. It's a bit over, I would say more than the national statistics, population statistics. Okay, so they have at that time they used a smartphone mostly, 88% already. So the analysis is PLS. So for the first study, the simple questions, I would like to find out whether smartphone or not smartphone actually were influencing their so-called dependency. Okay, so here starting with the social adaptive functions of the mobile phone, usually to the young people particularly, they will have the more uncontrolled inappropriate use or excessive use time, resulting in the so-called clinical problems or negative outcomes. So mobile phone with the internet, which is smartphone, that could increase the social connectivities, and it can actually link the different screen activities together. So these are very strong reasons at I think justify why I want to looking at a smart or not smartphone. Anything's actually will be different in terms of people's dependency. So mobile dependency is defined here as the relationship in which individuals attain goals by relying on using the mobile activities. I think it's very important to say the reliance on mobile activities instead of the gadget, because the gadget is artifact. Yeah, but things that we can do on the mobile phone or smartphones actually are the reasons why we get dependent on them, right? Okay. So smartphone with the lots of the advanced features at a time, I think hypothesize are most likely to increase the attachment and the dependency. So this is my first studies about smartphone dependency. Um, okay, the key results, I want to compare the differences between the smartphone and non-smartphone dependency and the impact of the mobile phone activities on their symptoms. So the results I find out certainly is it has lots of data collections and different hypotheses and the term, but eventually the important findings that I have from these studies are the following. Okay, the first one is the smartphone users using more mobile internet and text messages, like including at that time still they use the SMS and the mobile instant message like Line, or in Singapore perhaps we'll use more WhatsApp. Okay, show higher levels of the mobile dependencies and symptoms than the non-smartphone users. And the second thing, because social activities in the first slide, I think the connectivity or perpetual contact, these are more possible reasons for the young people to increase their dependency. So in these studies, I'm particularly looking at sociability. Sociability here is not the same as the sociability that we have in the social TV studies, because here we're talking about human activities. So sociability here is defined as a human desire to socialize with others, especially about the phone use, the mobile phone use. So in different kinds of study, we all need to clearly define what the terms, the key concepts that you use means, in the studies. Usually, even they sound the same, they look the same, but they are not the same. If they are used in different contexts, these are the things I want to remind you. So the second thing is the sociabilities of the smartphone users is associated with more dependency symptoms than sociabilities of the non-smartphones of users. Okay, and both of them actually are positive. I did not, this is the first study, it's an easy one and short one, so I did not pay too much attention. I just want to actually prove that my hypothesis about, smartphone and non-smartphone dependencies are actually exist, the differences. And the sociability did also means major parts, for those young people and cause the dependency differences. Okay, when they use smartphone or non-smartphone, because smartphone could let them have even more constant connectivities when they want to do the social activities. Okay, so this is a more developed models, because I want to using the same survey data set. If you have a good design of the questionnaire, usually you won't just have one good paper. I mean, it's a journal article, not just any research paper. So this one talking about the smartphone dependency, but particularly looking at the relationships of the users attributes and the mobile activities, and whether how they influencing the usage and the patterns, the symptoms. So from the same data set, then I have this, this is the proposed model. Okay, it may look a bit complicated, but remember when the first time we had a proposal, right? And Esther and Rona, they proposed something related to Clubhouse. And I think that looked very ideal, and then with lots of things on them. But sometimes all the different links, I think in a research model like survey, quantitative paper, we all have to have the origins or the backup from the past studies, most of them. So these are the difficult part. And so we cannot just draw anything like a research model and just put on there. No, we cannot, because we all have to justify. So here, based on the past studies, especially from internet addiction, or some of them, the so-called feature phone addiction, you know, so these kind of technological additions, they will have the past studies, and they also will provide some of the possible predictors. Okay, so the predictors means the so-called personal like traits, like here divide into psychological trait, smartphone activities, and I also put gender here. Okay, so these are the predictors and how they influencing the so-called dependency symptoms. So the dependency symptoms derive from the mobile addiction index created by a group of the scholars by adapted from not Singapore, Hong Kong's Chinese University's Louis Leong professor paper. So here means that if you have the smartphone dependency, you will have 4 different kinds of symptoms. Esther talking about productivity loss earlier. Yeah, no, that's the first. Okay, so when you work, when you study, you hardly can concentrate, and then it's actually influencing your performance. So there are 4 or 5 different questions related to that. So measurements also talking about dimensions withdrawal or escape. So basically you are not so participating or engaging in the communities because you are more like with yourself. So this could be one symptoms that are related to smartphone dependency. And you may find yourself easily feel anxious and lost. They will have some like so-called reverse questions, like you feel very anxious while you did not bring your phone or something like that. Okay, finally, you're inevitable, or it's like you're incapable to control yourself from craving of using phone. So inability to control craving is also another dimension of the symptom. So basically, it's I think it's a 16 to 17 questions. Sometimes people will have 21. There are different set of questions to measure the symptoms. And the last few hypotheses I'm interested is to looking at how the symptoms will be influencing the academic performance. I think most straightforward is the GPA and their social life, sociability. Okay, so here I put one additional factors looking at their influences or their mediated by this factor is called improper phone use. So what does it mean? Oh, some people talk about problematic phone use. Here is defined as you in the situations that are not suitable to using phones, but you still cannot resist. So something like will you use your phones in funeral, in church, or you will just took picture from the phone while people did not allow, or something like that. So there are a group of questions being tested before, of course, by other studies. Okay, so after the analysis, I think it's a PLS or SEM results shows all the things here. Okay, so I forgot to talk about the so-called predictors. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so I pick 2 things based on the past studies, leisure burden, and the sensational seeking. So when you easily feel bored while you have your free time, and the hypothesis that you tend to actually have a heavier dependency level, okay? And sensational seeking is similar, I think is also positive, related to the symptoms. Sensational seeking means you tend to have more excitement in terms of, the things you do, and you will seek for more exciting things to do, something like that. If you have the tendency, then you tend to have more dependencies on using smartphone. And here is the activities that has been tested. So I pick up the smartphone major activities like social media, gaming, and video, and and also have another. It's like a traditional phone use like call and SMS. Is the other main basic, functions that the old phones used to have. Okay, so I think most of the hypothesis has been supported, but the sensational seeking did not have the positive relationship associated with the symptoms, and it did not really shows the dependency symptoms in reducing the GPA or reducing the sociability. However, it's very interesting that improper phone use reduce the GPA, and also improper phone use reduce the perceived sociability. So then you have enough to actually justify why. Okay, so basically you show the symptoms, and so my justification will be like the symptoms are not directly related to the bad influences like reduce I would say reducing GPA or damage your sociability or social life. That definitely will come with some obvious behavior that you disobey some of the our mobile phone manners or the accurate that people or principles or norms that people would like to follow. So the key insights for this study is that the frequent use of the smartphone activities like video, games, social activities, increasing the dependency. Leisure burden is the key factors that will actually predicting the smartphone dependency symptoms, yet, the sensational seeking is not. Okay, so here you may suggest that we need to creating, recommending some of the comparing leisure activities to actually attract young people. Then they can probably work on, that kind of stuff. Like you can go to the group activities, go outdoors or anything. Then to keep track of them, just move their attentions, and then they will likely to reduce the dependencies on the smartphones. And in terms of the gender, past studies has the mixed feelings or mixed findings about the whether male or females tend to have a higher dependency. But I think here in these studies, because the mobile phone, I think majority of I would say is for communication, basic functions, and lots of activities are related to that. So females, as our hypothesis, are more inclined to experience the smartphone dependency and have a higher usage than the males. Okay. Finally, I just pointed out in that results, the higher degree of the smartphone dependency would not lead to the worse performance in academic like GPA, and only to those with the higher degrees of the improper phone use. So these are, I think, important things to do, important things to take note. So we need to monitor not just based on those people may have very obvious symptoms like incapabilities to control craving of using phone or productivity loss, because these may related, but if they are more serious and even have the improper phone use behaviors, I think these are most risky or more dangerous groups to require our help or some ways to keep them away from the additions. Okay. Okay, so also recommend to care about the young people, particularly shows in proper phone use, and also higher the smartphone dependency symptoms, including escapism, productivity loss, anxiety, and loss of control. All right. So far, I think we talked quite a lot about the 3 studies. But before we move to screen, so anything you would like me to clarify or you would like me to share more? Hello?
Just a general question, but how much time did you spend on this research? Because I have no idea if professors conduct research, actually, how time consuming it is. Because right now, for my own projects, I see I have 5 courses here in Taiwan, of which I think 4 expect me to write a full research paper, and I'm really
Exhausted.
exhausted, struggling on time with that, like 2 different interviews, 1 statistical paper. So I'm wondering, how much time did you spend?
Okay. I think it's just like a mobile addiction or smartphone addiction. There's no like a fixed number, you know. And then it's also varies from the context. If in the past, like Singapore, right? The Nanyang Technological University, I used to work there for 9 years, and so these are also developed there. So basically, thinking about collect, the so-called research developments. For the first two, the survey, okay. For the survey parts, you need to think about questionnaire developing and recruitment. If you have some help, like postdoc students, and you still, if you are not familiar with the line of the studies, you need to immerse yourself, into what is mobile addiction and make up your mind to thinking about dependency, not addictions, and looking at the instruments. So each step, you probably can spend more time or less time, depending on how familiar you are, the experts in that field. If not, everything will be the same. You are new. And if you ask yourself to be more professional, you spend more time. But just like the media, the news coverage, you have deadline, and you also have your KPI, and certainly you have your personal, like professional values, and so these are all factors influencing. But you asked me how long for that one. I think when I put them together in one survey, then the time, I think the analysis part for the quantitative research will be faster than the qualitative paper, because you already got some variables and then the fixed things in the survey, right? But the questionnaires need to develop from the literature review. Otherwise, they may not be able to put together. So you already got some models, but after you collect the data, you have to test things, and then you shifting some of the association, not related, situations, and put out a model. So it's long time ago. I couldn't really recall, but at least I spent 1 or 2 years for the 2 papers. Yeah, and because you will start from collect data, writing the conference paper, and then you presented the conference paper somewhere. Like I remember the second paper. I don't know whether I share with you with the version that I presented in the conference or the journal article, because I forgot. Okay, but you will have 2 versions. The first one will be the conference version. Then you will get lots of at that time people feel very interested about this, and they ask lots of questions. But still, I'm not particularly satisfied with the results. So I will run and rewrite. And then you have to submit it to the journal. And each journal, they may not like it. And then you may have bad luck with the very picky reviewers and get the rejections. So I remember at least 1 to 2 years or even more, usually for that 2 papers. And I sometimes I got not so lucky that I remember I have one paper with the impact factor more than 3.5. It's about health. And I have a student assistant. They did the documentaries and also cover the story about maternal mortality in the East Timor among a very, I think, difficult to recruit groups. And I think I spent 3 years writing papers or more than that, and then dozens of revisions. And finally, I got rejection. But I got accepted for everything, only the IRB. But IRB, you know what is IRB? The human subject. You have to prove that they are not harmed. But I got the IRB in my own university. I did not know at the time while we collected the data in the country. We even interviewed the presidents and the Minister of Health. None of them actually talking about they have a research cabinet and then doing the IRB locally. And I tried all my ways because the reviewer raised up that questions and said, you're supposed to do that. So I think she's probably very, or she is the insider. He knew the network, but he did not help me. So I have tried and tried and tried. I call and then doing the website and ask people to ask around, and none of them can help. And even 2018, I went to Queensland of University Technologies. They have someone did lots of research in Indonesian, and she did not help me too. So eventually, I got that paper just put it on the desk. Yeah, because you already took a lot of time to revise, and suddenly maybe the data get old, and then they fix certain journal, but other journal may not like it. So okay, till now I have maybe 58 journal articles, but if you're talking about the conference paper I've written, and it's more than hundreds, I think maybe even 200. Yeah, so it's really painstaking. I know it's difficult, and then I know you work hard, and but I think each step one, yeah, I think it paid off. If you do invest yourself, may not pay off now, and you feel particularly tired if you want to work hard and do well. But yeah, but my suggestion is that 5 papers sounds still very crazy, and then you need to judge. Sort of, my advice will be looking at each paper, and some paper you may put it in the category as, oh, that's a good practice, meaning good experience, because they may have some constraint. You just cannot do that too well. And there are some papers you think, oh, I can invest a lot of my time and even push to the conference level because it has the potential. Then you should focus on that kinds of paper. And some maybe in between. So you need to sort of put different efforts in different papers. Just like what I may have the multiple projects ongoing, I also need to know. And sometimes not necessarily will have good papers. Maybe the data set is not that well. So just think about these constraints and then work smart. That's still what I'm learning. I work hard, but how to be smart, I don't know. Yeah, still learning. Yeah, but that's a good question. I would like to share with you honestly. Yeah, but maybe that's abstract and spend lots of time. Yeah, thank you for
All right.
asking.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, so any other feedbacks or questions about the topic or anything related to your research? Oh, Esther, you raised your hand, right?
Yeah, Professor, I got a question that it's the question for the model.
Yep.
And I want to ask that do the latent factors that the circle one also need the support of the literature? Yeah, because I'm a little confused about the design of the latent factors in a complete structural model. I'm not sure that whether the latent factors is can based on my observations or they all have to base on the literature review.
Okay.
And yeah, and the factors that can the factors be also included in the hypothesis?
What factors? Latent factors.
Yeah, the latent factors, the circle one.
Okay. Okay, so if you observe, I think this is a good question and quite, I would say, advanced in terms of the quantitative research. But if you read enough of the foreign, I mean the Western journal articles, then you can tell that when you have the latent factors, which means they may not have past studies to very explicit support the A and B's relationship association, but you feel very interested and there are some indirect, maybe, uh, relations that you can actually sort of propose, then in the journal articles, they will use RQ instead of
Okay.
hypothesis. Yes, I
Okay.
think you can, but you don't want to have a lot of RQs in one paper because you will have a lot of things that are not so supported by the past studies.
Mm.
Yeah, I remember Georgia Wang, who is the very prominent professors. The first one, I would say, the Asian female professor presented as the keynote in the ICA, and she said because she got certainly also the PhD from US, and then so she said in the early age, when she developed academic papers and published in the SSCI journals, she feel like actually these papers are not like a groundbreaking types, and basically they will have very strong logic, and then based on the lots of solid literature review and the past association, and propose something that you want people to pay attention to. That's additional, not the same as the others models or others perspectives. So you cannot be everything new. You
Okay.
you must have something. I would say something variable that something important for people to pay attention to. But you need to stand on the ground of others' shoulders. So just noted that usually in all the hypotheses, you may only have one or two argues about the, latent factors that you would like to actually, you are very eager to prove the relationship. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. So any other questions? Okay. If not, I think I did have other papers. All right, so for these for the young people, right? So maybe we still have a few minutes. The recent award-winning papers. This is not study for, okay, because I did not plan to present it, okay, to you, but it's just I think last year I got ICA best papers for the mobile section, and we do talk about Phubbing, right? And then that's another term talking about nomophobia. Okay. Nomophobia is also a very fashionable term that people said it's a no phone phobia, means no mobile phone, you feel very anxious. It's a psychological, symptoms or disorders that you are going to have. So I would like to see the nomophobia and the Phubbing, how they influencing the smartphone use, especially the affective effects. So that's based on a research, a theory, and then particularly in the family coherence contest. So what is so the title has a family cohesion. Okay, so family cohesion will have lots of past studies need to find out, and these studies want to examine how smartphone communication between emerging adults or the university students. Actually, they are emerging adults. Okay, and then parents. The parents will be the only parents that they fill in the questionnaire. Okay, so influencing their like a family cohesions, and how do young people's negative technical psychological traits from the smartphone dependency relate to the affective effects of mobile communication and further influencing their cohesion. Okay, so the reasons to looking at families, I think there's a different dynamics, right? And so you need to define the key components, nomophobia and the Phubbing. These are the two emergent technical psychological traits, and they lead to the problematic mobile phone use among the young people. So these kind of things, you need to say, okay, what is the affective band? So ABCCT measures is what actually using to testing the so-called affective aspects of the phone use. So they will have different components, something in the cost and something in the so-called benefits. So here, so-called positive or the cost will be presence in, okay, like these are the negative part, which will be the cost. So presence in absence, unwanted obligations, or threat to privacy. These are the dimensions related to the cost. And something else will be benefits. Okay, so okay, here comes my model. Okay, nomophobia and phubbing, how they influencing these components, and I only pick up the key things, the presence in absence, which is actually the benefits, I would say, because you let people like your parents feel you are there with them, even though you are not physically together. So it's a benefit. It's for communication and connectivities. But unwanted obligations will be something that then you feel like you need to responding to their calls, and then they maybe have some rules to expecting your responses in certain way on phone, or they even sort of influencing your privacy issues. So these are the things may influencing the cohesions. And certainly this is the, actually I did this in Taiwan, so it's Taiwanese students, okay, and then with the three universities in the north, middle parts, and southern parts. So recruited the students, and then the students also need to meet the requirements that they rely on smartphone use to communicate with their parents. Okay, so it's a web survey, and totally 714 respondents. So this is called purposive or purposeful sampling. All right, so this descriptive, in terms of who they are, gender, age, and so they communicate with their parents each day. Here has like more than 1 hours. I don't know why the statistics show that, but it looks to me too long. Okay, and then they frequently use what kind of activities with the parents: voice call, social networking, or instant message app like Line. Okay, use the structure SEM, structural equation modeling to test, and the final model prove a good model fit. Okay, so here comes the results. So you can tell, with the star means they have significance. So most of the hypothesis has been supported. Okay, but something comes negative. So threat to privacy not influencing the family cohesion, but unwanted obligations negatively influencing the cohesions. All right, so you will have a summaries about, how they being supported or rejected. Okay. One thing to actually maybe remind before we go to the break is that I think for the quantitative papers, usually it's quite straightforward. As long as you have a good literature review and very logic, proposing your hypothesis and the argues, so people can easily follow. And then the result parts, you have the numbers, right? And everything looks very clear and it's straightforward. But I think you need to spend more time to do the discussions. Summary is what happened to the data and straightforward, but discussion is something will go beyond that. So it's not overclaim. You don't discuss something that you cannot support by your data, but you did come. I would say my strategy is actually to talk about some salient findings and support it by the past studies results. And you see similar patterns, and then also echo in your papers, and then you can looking at that and then see how actually you move forward. You contribute to use the concept or theories or to a different context or different social groups, and then also looking at something you are not expected, meaning not significant relationship or something even opposite to your hypothesis. I think they require more explanations. Okay, so after you're doing this, and you will have a good solid discussions, and particularly as your contributions to theory. So, but not necessarily everything will come theory first. sometimes theory also will be bring up again, in the back that specified the relationships that you have. The insights you have obtained or gotten from your research findings. All right. And that's one more thing to actually to remind is that we will also justify in the very beginning what kind of research gap that you have filled in and whether you have done that. And these will be part of your contributions, just like exam the emergent adults negative technical or techno psychological traits. These two factors actually people did not really use to looking at them and related to the smartphone use for family communications and the results. So I think these are the important parts and looking at the mediated presence of the parenting. Okay. All right, so I think we have now it's at past 3, so we can come back at 3:13. Then we will start another topic. Actually, it's a continuous topic and looking at the screen dependency. Okay, so I will see you later after 10 minutes. Let's come back. Okay, we are going to continue the next topic. I think it's equally or I think even more interesting because you talk about not necessarily we added it to smartphone, but to the screen. So the journey, of course, will just smoothly transfer, switch to the next step. So I looking at the screen dependency, not just the smartphone dependency. But what do you think is screen dependency? Have you heard of it before? Hello? Hi,
No,
Ari.
I haven't heard.
No, you haven't, Lucas?
No, at
Not
least
yet.
not in an academic way.
All right, all right. But we did have the academic paper. I think most of them call it screen dependency disorder. Okay, and yeah, so it's a different line of study. They are more, yeah, because I quickly checked Google Scholars and there are a few papers. Yeah. Okay. So how about Ari? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi. So Ari, do you think you have some sort of dependency on using screens?
I think it kind of developed when I got to Taiwan, but before it wasn't as serious.
Okay, how so and why?
Because before for work, I would like use my phone for leisure stuff, but most times I'll be working, writing stories, and I won't be checking social media. I won't be that involved with trying to have a screen on in front of me. But then I got to Taiwan, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things are screen dependent. So I
Like,
go to PXMart and I take out my phone and I use the app to get my reward points. I use a lot of apps to do a lot of things in Taiwan. And
uh,
then I check social media more to see what my friends are up to back home.
okay.
So yeah,
So basically, the environment's also influencing your screen dependency, right? If they
yeah,
have more activities on there and the people around you in that country or communities, they also use a lot of the device to connect, then you probably have to, if you want to be part of them, you have to participate, right? Yeah. So I think the Lucas said he hasn't heard of the screen dependency, especially in the academic way, because usually people start talk about just like what I'm interested. Usually, is emergent technological phenomenons like screen dependency. I think the first term come out is in 2017, and lots of people keep talking about they spend too much time on screen, and then there's a dependency and some issues. The parents should watch out for their children's, maybe some bad influences on using too much screens. And then, so mostly they're talking about like a smartphone, then go to the screen dependency disorder. Okay, so now let's just watch two videos. And the first one, short ones. Okay, the first one is talking about how much actually screen can influencing or damaging our brains. Okay, what do you think after looking at this? Okay, let me escape. I cannot escape. Okay, too much screen time. Okay. Okay. So, all right, so let's watch another one, and then it's also a short one, then we can discuss together. Because we're talking about the screen may influencing, different screen activity influencing our brains. I think all negative, and we get angry, and we cannot really fix our bodies during screen, sleeping or something else. So how about to the most, I think, vulnerable group, which is the children's. And so many, I would say, kids, they are using iPad. So I think we quickly watch two videos related. All right, so let's come back, and please let me see your face. I mean, beautiful, handsome faces, and we can have a short interactions. So scary after watching the two videos, or any thoughts? Who wants to go first? Ari, you are so blurry. Okay, so Ari, you think which parts actually you feel more alerted for the two videos? Are they just horrified things? They are not so dangerous, just scare us?
I don't know, because for me it's different, because with the video games I play violent video games, but I've also seen a lot of stuff while being a journalist. So then I can't really relate it fairly. So I don't know if I'm insensitive because of the video games or if I'm insensitive because of what I've seen in journalism.
Okay, so you have the real life experiences,
Yeah.
something maybe equally cruel or real in the real world. Yeah, okay. But do you think the dependency may influencing your behaviors? Because they talking about you feel more anger, more angry about some situations, and then influencing your maybe learning, concentrations, and even I'm going to stop using the phone before my sleep because they were also changing my biological clock. I think for the young people like you may not be so I say essential, but for me, I think I need to really consider not using the phone, watching videos. Sometimes I like to listening to things, and I would just put the phone on, and then maybe have some like inspiring talks or whatever. While I think while my sleep, then I can still maybe just they will just die down after a while. Yeah. So anything you want to discuss or you want to share? Do you have like younger people, like children in your own families or friends' families, and you observe that they use screen quite a lot? And are they sort of moderated or not?
I think that the new generation, that's how they're being raised. So while we may have learned from maybe building blocks and that sort of thing, most children now learn from tablets and YouTube videos. So for them, being obsessed with screens is normal.
Okay, that's something interesting. I observe as some children, including my brother's son, and they really love to stay home and have the distance learning because they love to watching the screens. They're more exciting, and then they could also multitasking and sometimes switch the attention from the class into other activities on the screen. So the younger one said, "Oh, fantastic! I really like it. I don't need to sort of just sit in the classrooms and then have lots of rules. I can be my own king or ruling the screens by myself." Oh, maybe you laugh. Anything you want to share? We need to quickly talk around.
I think it's funny. Well, we saw two videos, and I think the second one sound more positive than the first one. Like in the second video, it mentioned about the functions in the iPad. So I have an example about my mom's friend. She has a little kid, and he's like learning Spanish and maybe 4 years old, and he's using iPad to learn. So I think it shows the positive side of being addicted to mobile phones and iPads.
Uh-huh.
And I think for the first video, it's for everyone, not just kids, but also us.
Mm-hmm. So I think also whether actually mobile or a screen can be used for learning purposes, I think it's quite different in different countries. Like in Singapore, I think that's one I always say quite absurd example is that when my son studied there, and I think I did not give him like a smartphone, because I think you are just elementary school students, and we have a living helper because I work there alone and raising him, so I need someone to help. So basically, he will have someone to pick him up, and then not necessary to have a phone. But I think from grade 5, and the teacher asked him to join a social media like Facebook account, and later we'll have a group, and then send out like primary school. After that is secondary school, like 12 years old, and all the things will be on smartphone. They have some activities. So one time inside the phone is I got to buy a phone, and the phone is malfunctioning, and so the teacher was upset and said and scolding him, and also said you should buy a phone for him or something, because that's a device for them, is for learning. It's not for just something that we treated maybe in Taiwan. And when I have some of the interviews in the high school, and I remember lots of the high schools, they locked the mobile phone in the safety box or whatever, so you couldn't touch them before you leave in school because there will be a distraction. So they are so different. And in Singapore, that's integrated some of the checking, like a dictionary or different activities, informations on phone they have to use in class. And in Taiwan, that is something they are also afraid to distract you, or maybe give you some more addiction. So what do you think about this? Or anything you want to add?
Mm, I
Or,
think it will depend. Oh,
okay, go
okay,
ahead.
I'll do it quickly. I think it will depend on whether the teachers or the school restrict on their way of using their mobile phone. Like it's like two different directions.
Yeah. So maybe need a balance is a better way, right?
Mm.
Anything else?
I think I read a paper somewhere. I think from my memory it's probably Swiss. I think the school has the more money, so they buy their own tablets for school in school, and they can control what's on the tablet. So they use these tablets frequently, but there are no other apps or gaming apps on their tablets, so
Okay.
they won't get distracted.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
I think
Okay.
that's probably a good way, but very expensive though.
I think in Singapore they are very into the technologies or gadgets. So they also buy some tablets or new things for the students, and then they all try to integrate these kind of technologies into learning or doing projects. So that's sort of the norm they get used to. I don't know whether it's a good or not. And so right now my son back to Taiwan, and then currently, if not because of the third level alert, he studied in a boarding school, and in that boarding school there will be no science, no computer or no internet connectivity and no smartphone at all. And but they need to learn 3 languages. So basically, it's a very strict restricting from all the so-called bad influences outside. Okay, I did not really proud of putting him there, but it's his choice and it's come with that different package. So anyway, he want to study in the international school, so yeah, come with that. All right. So if you don't have, maybe we can talk later. Yeah, we can go to the studies because we only have a few minutes to talk about that. All right, so this studies actually is a collaborated research with Michigan State University's professor. It's called Konova. Okay, Konova. Basically, we looking at the so-called screen dependency and compare the two different situations and how the relationships of the media multitasking and the screen additions among the users, internet users in US and Taiwan. So there are some layman term or the so-called news reporting, and there's some alarming, content talking about screen dependency or screen dependency disorders. However, there's an increasing number of people. This is the phenomenons and being observed, but how could we actually put it into more academic paper? So that's an increasing number of people engaging in the multi-screen media consumptions, and people raise different so-called scholarly interests in terms of different addictions and different dependency, multitaskings. Okay, so I need to tell you the constraints because that actually the questionnaire has been developed before I joined the team. So I could not really add my own new questions into that already collected survey data. So I got to looking at what actually have gotten and what have been left. So basically, I have some other papers. So I think this is the approach I want to looking at the cross-country comparisons. At that time, they do have something. They looking at the screen use, and they have the filtering questions about how many screens you have. So we are looking at people who own more than 3 screens, and they do use a lot of screen time. So we can fit into this kind of looking at the screen dependencies. At least the respondents are qualified to answer the questions. Okay, so you got to really look if these are not your first initiative questionnaires, and definitely you need to be more creative and looking at what can be done, with the existing variables. Okay, so the definitions of the screen dependency is looking at the media multitasking. So media multitasking is simultaneous media use, and there are different devices has been involved, and the cost concern of the negative impacts on the screen usage. So the purposes in the past, there's limited research about the multi-screen device addiction or dependency and how it relates to uh, the so-called multitasking behaviors. So the purpose is to looking at the screen device addition and then relations with multitasking device use and leisure burden again, okay, and countries of residence. Here means American and Taiwan. So wanted to contribute to the existing literature and also provide the evidence to actually elaborate the series models. Maybe in future can also recommend some strategies how to develop and then to prevent undesirable consequences of the screen addition. Or okay, so here I use actually it's a negotiation. If I could, I would say it should be something called screen dependency is instead of screen addiction. But I think other professors would prefer screen addiction. So the title here is still called screen addiction. But there are still some other papers, I would say some reports talking about screen dependency disorder. So it's called, but it's interesting, disorder also related to addiction. So we have some arguments there. Okay. But we need to actually settle down to a consensus. So eventually we're looking at a screen addiction or screen device addiction. All right. So this may sound or look familiar to you because I just explained the symptoms of mobile phone addiction index. And then it has the full dimension of the patterns or the symptoms, inability to control craving, and so on and so forth that you can see here. So you may ask why I still using this because that has been done there, in the instruments they have collected data. So it's not particularly to looking at the mobile phone because the whole questionnaire, I think they design in a way actually looking at the screen. But we use these measurements to looking at screen addition. All right. Miming first in the class talking about multitasking. Yeah, certainly multitasking motivations will be something quite related to what we are concerned is like a screen dependency or addiction. So we hypothesize, based on the past studies, yes, we think it's positive associated with the extent of the screen addiction. And the next part, because we also justify that we feel cultural differences, or like in US will be something more individualism, and in Taiwan it's more collectivism, and different kinds of countries they may influencing the results. So the second hypothesis, the country of residence will moderate the effects of the media multitasking on the extent of the screen addition. So the next hypothesis, and then you also see the RQ here, is about leisure burden. We use that in the past smartphone dependency study, so you knew what it means. So we feel like it will be also positive predict the screen device addiction. Yet, we did not really have the past supports to have the moderating relationship among the three factors here. So we propose an RQ. How will the leisure burden moderate the effects of the media multitasking on screen device addiction? All right. So the screen device usage is another important factor because everyone, when they're talking about the so-called dependency or addictions, they use the excessive use to actually be part of the, important criteria to looking at whether you are addicted or not. So here we hypothesize screen device usage is positive associated with the addiction, and also two other RQs. Will screen device usage mediated the multitasking, or will leisure burden moderate the screen use, mediating effects on the relationship between the multitasking and the addiction, and also differ by country. So they sound very complicated. All right. So here comes the model. Okay, so we're also looking at the conditional effects of the multitasking on the additions with the device use as moderator and leisure burdens and country as mediator and moderators. So we collect in a similar way to collect the data in US and in Taiwan. So we recruited panel data, cyber panel. In Taiwan, we use as IS, is the eyesight to recruit the cyber panel. And in US, there will be Amazon Mechanical Turk. So we use different languages to recruit people, but we do the transfer. It's sort of translated back and forth to check the, whether they have the consistency. Okay, so we can see we have similar male and the female proportion, and here just a very standardized way to sort of tell people, where your so-called important key measurements come from. So you have a screen dependency, screen additions concept, and the multitasking index. So also ledger burden and the ownership index. So compare the two samples. We can, see that whether they are different or not. So American users, they are more media than Taiwan's users, and they spend more time in using full screen devices. And they engage the multitasking actually more than respondents in Taiwan. However, we find that Taiwanese respondents go higher, on the screen device addition than American users. So it's very interesting, right? In Taiwan, we own less screen and spend less time engaging in less media multitasking activities on screen, yet we have a higher levels of so-called screen device addiction. Okay, so we run the regressions first, and the results shows that here, okay, the more hours participants spend on using the device, the screen devices, the more they multitask with the media. However, the more they feel bored when they have leisure time. And the more likely they would get addicted to the screen devices. So these are the results shown from the table 3. So the next one, we are looking at the, so moderating conditional effects or mediating effects and, other things more complicated. So RQ3 asks, will screen device usage being the moderator for the relationship? The answer is yes. So we can tell that yes, being the moderator, sort of influencing the multitasking and screen device use and the screen device use and the addiction. Okay, so effects of the multitasking on the screen additions was significant. Okay, effects of the ledger burden on the addition was not significant or being rejected. So basically just remove the inference of the ledger burden, but multitasking, this shows us important, inference on the screen addition. And also we're looking at the RQ1 and the H4 and H2. So RQ1 shows the multitasking and ledger burden interaction. Effects on the screen additions was not significant. So basically involving the ledger burden seems not really influencing the results. Yet multitasking and the different countries' interactions, actually they show significant inferences on the screen device addiction. So you can tell that here, like the figure shows that, so US, they tend to have a lower multitasking and lower additions, and Taiwan has the other way. Yep. So a hypothesis for being accepted or supported is that the more time participants spend on the device use, the higher level of the addition. Okay. So we have lots of complicated, I would say, statistic results looking at different factors and how they influencing or mediate or moderate each other. The reason is that because we only have limited like variables, and then we do want to look at the relationship between them. And sometimes, usually, this kind of paper, I think, will be not the first round, and second round, or maybe the third round of looking at the same data set or doing the comparison data set. They tend to looking at such complicated analysis. So here at the left-hand side, the figure 2, it shows that at the lower levels of the multitasking, Taiwanese respondents shows a greater addiction than American users. The differences between Taiwanese and Americans, however, become smaller, and you can see when, the so-called media multitasking levels get higher. Yeah, it's quite obvious here. And the next figure 3, the figure shows in Taiwan the effects of multitasking on the screen addiction gradually decreased. Yeah, you can see, in US. And Taiwan actually are more salient. Okay, so basically that they all decreased, but in a different, I would say, in different pattern. So the differences in the effects between Taiwan and the US was salient among the users who perceive the lower levels of the so-called ledger burdens. So they have a huge gap here. But when they get higher, they actually very close to each others in terms of the screen dependency, screen device addiction, and being infected by the multitasking. All right, so in these studies, what actually we can bring from, the results. So internet users, because we're looking at internet users, and then particularly they own the screens, multiple screens. So their multitasking and the screen device use were positively associated with the screen additions in both countries. And when people exhibited the excessive use of the device, they are, the probability of the additions among the heavy users or heavy media multitaskers increase. And next, people with a higher multitask with media heavily use the screen devices. These people tend to have a higher level of addiction. And we also find the more participants multitask with the media and the longer time they spend on the device. I think, yes, it's obvious. And finally, the screen device use mediated the positive effects of the multitasking on addiction and influenced the screen additions among the heavy multitaskers. All right. Okay, so this is the last page for this study. So basically, I think in the contribution parts, we need to look in at the theoretical contribution and the practical contributions. So particularly when you have very complicated relationships or the findings, so I think it's particularly important to actually explain what can be the important, lesson learned. So it's expanded the media addiction studies actually, I think they are the latest multi-screen device addiction, and also identify some mediating effects of the screen use on the relationship of multitasking and the screen additions, and identify ledger burden as a moderator, but the moderator for only the interaction effects among the device use, multitasking, and the device addition, and also show the moderating effects of the country, multitasking, screen use, and also addition. So we suggest to actually emphasize the importance of the literacy in terms of how to use the screen device and how to moderate that, and then curb the addition, possible addition, and then resulting in negative effects. And the healthcare professionals and the policymakers should be mindful to those people if they have the higher levels of ledger burden. So I think we also see similar results in the smartphone dependency. So if we do have some we easily feel bored while we have lots of free times, then probably we need to think about more constructive and healthy ways to fill in the blanks. All right, so these, because the so-called personal trait of the ledger burdens are not so good to the so-called screen addiction. All right. So the last two questions, I think we probably cannot have much time to discuss, but I want you to think about whether there are any inferences on the so-called, we have lots of aspects to cover already about the mobile phone dependency or smartphone dependency, and then also screen dependency or addiction. Whether you do see anything changes because the pandemic, people change their patterns or they become even heavier users on screens, and then we have to worry more about the situations. And what kind of the so-called screen dependency research that you think you will be interested to develop, after this. All right. So this is the page actually show what I have done. And in addition to what I have presented, I also work with my two PhD students and in different topics like M-Health app or senior people using mobile phone or working on so-called mobile dependency in the context of the young adults in China. So it's a mixed method. So I did not have time to show you the results about this line of study, but it's very interesting because in the beginning, we're looking at the young people in university, right? And then my students will be interested in the specific social groups or context. So Lily from China, she felt like she wanted to focus on working adults. So he published a few papers with me, looking quantitative, qualitative, looking at different organizational characteristics or work-related characteristics, and in terms of the performance and the smartphone addiction. And the other groups of papers done with the Robert, another PhD students now, I think, okay, both of them become, okay, Lily become associate professors in China's Yunnan University, just got promoted, I think. And Robert moved to US as the postdoc in UT Austin. And he particularly interested in health communication. So the paper that was his own research, the thesis, focusing on nurse use on the mobile phone, personal mobile phone in Philippines. Okay, so he also developed different kinds of paper, quantitative, qualitative, and with me before and after the thesis. All right. So we go back to this slide. Could you turn on your camera? Okay, so I just want to tell you, we may feel intrigued by certain, I would say, for me, emerging technologies like mobile phones, smartphone screens. And then with that, we can think about different kinds of methods, different kinds of directions. It could be a mixed methods. So you can, starting from the most accessible, maybe the young people, university, college students, and then you span to senior group and looking at different activities and like mobile health. And you can also looking at the young adults, working people in workplace and related to dependency. So there are a lot of directions that you can go, or nurse, But I think the most important things is that you must feel interested, and you must have the accessibility and the feasibility to complete the study. All right. So can we just have like 2 minutes, and then we'll have 5 people. So each of you maybe can just choose one question, 30 seconds, and wrap up today's lesson. Who want to go first? Lucas? Or anyone? Talk about the influences of pandemic, or you want to do any kind of research related. Okay, go ahead.
Regarding the influences, now I got some echo. I still try to talk. So regarding the influences after the COVID-19 pandemic, regarding the usage of mobile devices, I think all the people are spending way more time at their mobile phones. At least I can see it for myself that I spend like 3 times the time on my smartphone I spent before. And I think it will be interesting to analyze the impact of such a heavy usage in such an isolated situation like a pandemic. Now I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, yeah, because I avoiding your echo. So maybe you also can looking at the factors influencing of the usage, and then also related to maybe psychological, impact. You feel more alone, or you feel more depression, or you feel more happy. I don't know. Well-being could be another things that we can also look at. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. Anything else? Anyone? I have to ask all of you before we go so quickly.
I have one, though I'm not sure if it's like doable. I'm a bit curious about how the nurses and doctors living in the hospital try to keep in touch with their family, and also how do they share their lives in the hospital with mobile devices. Oh, sorry, I cannot hear.
Yeah, because I avoid your echo. So I think particularly in the time of the pandemic, right now we have lots of health professionals. They have to really live in the hospitals and helping people. Yeah, so I think there will be very important research, but very hard to get the data because they are busily saving lives. They may not even have time to talk to their family. Yeah. But maybe after that, they can do a record, interviews or something like that. All right. So how about Esther?
Sorry.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
So for the first question, that the influence after the pandemic, I think it's more heavier because like we always use phone when we are resting, like eating food or in our leisure time. But now even working or studying also, like we have to go through the screen. So it's like we can't avoid the screen like nowhere. And for the research question, I think about that. Maybe can explore about the pattern that virtual social during the pandemic.
What do you mean virtual social?
Like because we can't meet each other in person, right? In the pandemic, so there's some websites that has developed to let people to have some social connection on the websites, just like the Gather Town. I don't know if any of you guys heard before that people can really have the character in the screen and they can walk together and play some games, and even when working, it's like a virtual office. So probably it's workable to do the research. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You also remind me of the VR world. It's called SR Space. Has been done by the HTC, and yeah, they are using avatar for people can playing along the beach and they're playing basketball together, doing yoga or watching movie and then getting on the hot air broom. So during the so-called people need to keep the social distancing, it gives more reasons for the VR or the things that we can live in a virtual world, and the social activities engagement will be more important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyone?
I'm thinking because not all people actually enjoy this kind of changes that we have to use the screen all the time. So maybe I'm interested in the workplaces, like how media dependence on the workplace is actually increasing, or how is that experience? Because maybe people are forced to do that socially instead of the psychological dependence, like in the entertainment.
Okay, so you want to work looking at during the so-called pandemic, and people were they also being more how actually related to the working people's screen use and the
Yes.
dependency. Okay, all right. So yeah, that would be interesting. So anything at some other layers or components will actually change and be in a different ways and more interesting to look at, right? Different context. Yeah. So, Ari, you want to end?
Yeah,
Like you?
I'm interested in looking at how people would readjust. There are some people during the pandemic that because they were home from their 9 to 5 jobs, they got involved in more what's the word I'm looking for? I'll just say online, more online methods of making money and end up making a lot more money than they used to make at their jobs. So I'm wondering, like, for people like that, how would they ever return to the normal 9 to 5 jobs, and how would it affect the rest of the economy on a larger scale?
Wow, you should tell us what kind of business that these people are making, because now we all worry about, oh, some people can open their shops and other people are losing their businesses. Yeah, so that's a different way. Maybe people need to change the mentality, thinking about online and then the opportunities to do different kinds of business. Not really. I think the good ones. Means good ones not necessarily earn lots of money, but at least it's not have any problems. Okay. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Okay. So I think I really enjoy the whole semesters, and we are together, and we go through lots of different topic about new media, and then we also experiencing means we go with the different professors to different countries and different topics, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, and particularly I appreciate your involvements. In Taiwan, we have different groups and background. And then Lucas, you are particularly give you big flows. And then because you are in the morning, and but you always with us, I think that's very important things. And yeah, it also shows the connectivity can actually penetrating the space and time because your participation and all of us. And now, with the screens, we still, I think, accomplish a good semester. All right. So thank you so much. And then next week will be the holiday. But if you have any questions, don't be shy. Just ask me and we can discuss. And certainly it's a short semesters. And then I know you have tried to do your best for your research project. But no matter what, I think there will be a good practices and a good experiences. And if you feel like you can push limit or the envelope and then submit to a conference, I will be particularly happy about that. But no matter what, it's a good semesters. I think we all learn a lot. I learned a lot from you and from the professors, and I really, really enjoy the interactions here. Thank you so much for the good semester. All right. So I will see you for the last important week, and then please prepare for the presentation and the paper. All right. And take good care of yourself. I want to see you happily while we have the last session. I mean, healthy and happy. Thank you. Take care. See you
Everyone.
after 1 week. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.